It might take a minute. Hello, everybody, and welcome to what's going to be a great conversation with a lot of great reporters from across the state tonight for a preview of all 8 football state championship games at Gillette Stadium this week. Games Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. My name is Gage Nutter with MassLive, and like I said, we're going to have a lot of great reporters on tonight for the next hour or so, chopping it up about all 8 games. The format for tonight's show, we're going to start with Division 8. We're going to start with talk about Randolph and West Boylston. We're going to work all the way up to Division 1 to end off the show. It's going to be a really fun night. It's going to be a really fun night of conversation, chopping it up and just breaking down what's going to be a great 3 days in Foxborough this week. And like I said, we're going to start with D8 when it comes to Randolph and West Boylston. And to help us get a little bit more perspective on that game this week, I want to bring in Rich Garvin from the Worcester Telegram and Gazette. Thanks so much, Rich, for jumping in here. I'm super excited to get your perspective on this game. Just as it relates to West Boylston, just to kind of start there, the team that you've seen more of. If Coach Ross is involved and they're running that run first offense and they're trying to get 3 yards in a cloud of dust, they're going to be successful. And that's just what West Boylston does. They've been successful at doing that down in Division 8, and they've done it really better than anybody else this year. That's why they're the number 2 seed. I know they're going for that three-peat. They beat Carver last year, 41-7 in D8. They beat St. Bernard's in Division 7 in 2022. 29-6, but it's a new year, it's a new team, it's a new Lions group. What should people know about this year's Lions group? What has made them so good, do you think, so far this season?
Yeah, so I would say they've stuck to the principles, so to speak, and that's a run first offense and that double wing T offense that Mike's run at North High, Grafton, and now West Boylston. And I can't remember, I should have looked this up, first or second coach to win 3 Super Bowls at 3 different schools in state history.
Good stat.
And it's all been with that offense. I think the hook this year with them is that they're actually passing a little bit more than normal. Connor Rice, who was a holder for extra points last year, is now their quarterback. And he's only thrown 40-something times this year, but he's completed half his passes, and 24 of his completions, 10 of them have been for touchdowns. So they've actually thrown a little wrinkle in this year. And I don't know if you remember, I didn't look this up again. Aiden Hamilton last year, who's back with this team, he caught something around an 84-yard pass last year, which is the longest touchdown reception in state Super Bowl history. This is from a run-first offense. So little wrinkle this year with the team from that end.
Gotcha. Okay. And just for recap for people that aren't initiated with West Boylston, in the round of 16, defeated Hoosick Valley 29-12. Round of 8, another Berkshire team, Lee, was previously undefeated, beat them 35-3. And then in this last semifinal the other week, beat Carver 36-14. So getting 30 plus offensively pretty consistently so far this season. But when it comes to West Boylston, though, Rich, as it relates to their offense, again, like you said, everybody kind of knows what they're going to do. Besides maybe this wrinkle that they're adding when it comes to the airborne game a little bit, but their bones are in that run first offense. But just looking at what they do defensively, what's been your perspective on them when it comes to West Boylston on the defensive side of the ball? Who are some people that maybe stick out on that end?
Yeah, so they, West Boylston losses at a Northbridge in overtime in the season opener, which Northbridge made the state quarterfinals where they were ousted by Uxbridge, and there were losses to Clinton, which made the Division 7 state semifinals. After the Clinton loss, they kind of had a come-to moment. They were 3-2, and they've been scoring the points along the way, but they've tightened up defensively. Aiden Hamilton is there's not a lot of carryover from the last 2 teams people need to be aware of. That the last two Super Bowl teams were junior. Those kids won as juniors. They came back and won as seniors. Most of the starters this year are first-year guys. One of the few who aren't, Aiden Hamilton, 4-year starting middle linebacker, started as a freshman. Leads the team in tackles. I'm going to pronounce this wrong, but Kayem Frimpong is another guy who, a linebacker up there with Hamilton in tackles and also pressures the quarterback. They're just fundamentally sound defensively. And it helps if you're playing with the lead most of the time, which they are. But Connor Rice, who's the quarterback, who's a first-year quarterback, is also a first-year starter at defensive back, and he's been a strength in that secondary as well. So, they've been solid defensively, and again, it helps playing with the lead.
Right. And people just joining us, talking with Rich Garvin from the Worcester Telegram and Gazette right now for what's going to be a really good Division 8 game between Randolph and West Boylston. But Rich, just to give, I guess, a look at to the kids on the other sideline when it comes to Randolph. You were just talking about West Boylston, the program coming in as the number 2 seed. Randolph, they're the top dogs this year as the number 1 seed. And I still remember back in 2021, they weren't the top dogs. They were, in fact, the number 10 seed back in 2021 when they won their first and only state championship to date. They were the number 10 seed, and they beat Hull at the state championship 20-14, making them, I think, and I'm pretty sure this is correct, the lowest seed since the introduction of this new format to win a state championship. So first time Randolph was at Gillette playing for a state championship. No one thought they'd be there this year. They're the top seed, so they have that target on their back. I guess a quick look at how they got here. Randolph, 67-6 win against Quabog in the first round. That one was pretty definite. Quarterfinal win over Narragansett, 40-8. Semifinal win over Neshoba Valley Tech in the semis, 28-12. I was doing some reading up on these guys over the last few days, and Randolph coach John Marshall had a quote in a story by Ryan Vermette at the Brockton Enterprise saying that running back Mekhi White, he's the fastest kid in the state. So I'm really interested in seeing, these kids in Division 1, Division 2, they get a lot of love for their athleticism at these big schools, but a D8 kid who's able to kind of put on the afterburners and break it down the sideline. I'm interested to see how that offense with him in tow is going to look. That Blue Devils offensive line paved the way for more than 300 rushing yards and 4 touchdowns on the ground against Neshoba Valley Tech. So it looks like it starts up front with them too. So the clock's going to be rolling. Us as sports writers, we're going to love that, right? We keep that clock moving. I mean, we love Gillette, but that it seems like that clock is going to be moving a little bit. Another thing I love, I noticed about Randolph, reading the story by Ryan Vermette. Coach Marshall says when it comes to them, they don't have an X factor, they have an R factor, which I'm not going to put you on the spot and make you guess what the R factor is, Rich. I'll just tell you, it's resilience. So that's the R factor for Randolph, the resilience. So I'm really looking forward to seeing that one. I imagine you'll have game coverage of that one, Rich. Will you be there for that one?
We will. And I mean, I can weigh in on Randolph a little bit, just peripherally. So a friend of mine who's a former coach saw the Narragansett Randolph game, and then he spoke with Coach Ross, who wasn't available today because of a teacher's meeting when I was down at practice. Anyways, Coach Ross told him that they haven't seen that kind of speed yet this year, is what Coach Ross told my friend who's a former coach. So Mr. White from Randolph, you said it, he's fast, not Division 8 fast, but fast. So that's going to be an adjustment for them. The other thing you would look at from both teams is if you run the ball, if you can take the lead, we know the game's getting shortened. So I think it's going to be very imperative for whoever is, and probably in West Boylston case in particular, because I would say they're a decided underdog, not in the typical 1-2 fashion. Randolph, if you want to dummy it down, Randolph's only losses to Mashpee by 5, and Mashpee beat Clinton, which beat West Boylston. So
Sure.
If you connect the dots that way, it makes them the favorite. So I think in this game, it's going to be a shortened game, limited possessions, and getting the lead is going to be, I think, particularly key for West Boylston. So
Gotcha. Every snap of the ball is going to matter. That's going to be a great one. But I want to keep you here to talk about Division 7. Number 1 Uxbridge against number 3 Mashpee. Speaking of Mashpee, to kind of, I guess, set the scene, Uxbridge, they're going for back-to-back. They beat Amesbury last year pretty handedly, 42-16 in the Division 7 title game. It seems like had a pretty decent run through this postseason so far. Talking about Uxbridge, 48-17 win against St. Paul's, shutout win over Gardner, big one over rival Northbridge in the semis on Thanksgiving. I think I saw it correctly. So before getting to Mashpee, now talking about Uxbridge in this Division 7 state championship game, what can you tell us about Uxbridge? I know they have a La Chapelle back there, which I don't know if there's any more La Chapelles sort of in the chamber coming down, but there's another one right there. He's been playing well, Camden La Chapelle. But to get to this game, it takes more than one guy. So what can you tell us about Uxbridge and what they've been able to do so well this year?
I mean, I'm going to say first off that Matt Blood, the coach, they more or less last year was the culmination of a 3-year build-up for them. You know, they had a big group. They played a bunch of kids as sophomores. Like I think they had graduated like 19 seniors last year. Played them as sophomores, made the move as juniors. Last year won the state title. This year, it's a cast that's new. They've entered program territory here. They got revolving. I hear they have a big junior class behind this class. They got a build-up going here, you know. So 26 straight wins with Cam La Chapelle's the anchor offensively for them and a holdover. But most of these kids are new guys. And, you know, Cam is a guy, for people who don't know him, lists himself at 5'8", 190. The thing with Cam is it's hard to find him at the line of scrimmage because he's small. The best view people usually get of him is when they turn around because he's hit the second level and he's gone. So he kind of disappears in the line, breaks out the other side, and see you later. So
Right.
Leads Central Mass in rushing, leads Central Mass in scoring, highly productive yards per carry, breaks tackles.
Wow. And it's interesting you say that about how many kids they graduated at the end of last season. Because especially, you know, let's say you're a D1, 2, maybe 3 program, you graduated big class, you can kind of wear that a little bit and you can kind of sort of turn that corner. But you get down to D7, D8 and you graduate that many guys and you're just turning that much of a page coming into a new year. There can be a lot of fluctuation there. But the fact that they're able to sort of turn that page and bring all these new guys in and they sort of understand what it means to be a part of the program. That's huge. So that's going to be interesting when it comes to Uxbridge, if them going for that second straight title. I do want to take a look, if I can, at Mashpee, who they're going to be playing. Mashpee is no stranger to Gillette Stadium. Last time they were there was in 2017, but they were there in 2011, 15, 16, and then 17 most recently. They won that state championship in Division 7 against Blackstone Valley Tech in a good game. Beat St. Bernard's in the first round of the playoffs this season. Beat Amesbury in the quarterfinals, and then beat Clinton by a touchdown in the semi as well. I was taking a look. You can't sort of glean everything from numbers, but just taking a look at that semifinal game, Dominic Matiodo, pretty decent pronunciation, 10 for 18 passing, 208 yards, 2 touchdown passes. Ryan Treveri was on the end of most of those, 5 receptions, 123 yards, 2 touchdowns. You did mention Mashpee has that win over Randolph on its resume, which is that's pretty impressive. We were just talking about Randolph, obviously being the number 1 seed in Division 8. So this is a really good setup. I mean, it's 1 versus 3. It's going to be an interesting matchup. But when it comes to Uxbridge, what is there anything else as it relates to those guys down in Central Mass that people that might not be so inclined with Uxbridge football should know about, maybe heading into Gillette? If there's anybody from the Cape tuning in, if they're trying to figure out, like, okay, who's my son or daughter playing at Gillette, what else can people know about this year's team for Uxbridge in particular?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of good players on this team. I'll give you 3 names. Senior Liam Kaffelin he contributes in all 3 phases: special teams, defense, offense. Big time playmaker. in terms, averages about 16 yards of reception. He's averaged a touchdown every 4 catches this year, roughly, just rounding up. Rogan Devlin is the quarterback. I'm sorry, Rogan Devlin. My apologies. And first-year guy, I don't think he had a snap in 3 years with the varsity because Cam LaChapelle's brother was playing in front of him. Anyway, Rogan's 1,000-yard passer, rushed for 8 touchdowns. RPO guy, hides the ball well, makes good decisions, and in the times he doesn't, the coaching staff has praised him for not making the same issue again or same mistake. And the last guy is Chase Hanault to me. He's an interior lineman, number 64 in your roster. His stats are okay. Super disruptive. He does things that other people get the stats for. But super disruptive. So defensively, I'd keep an eye on him.
All right. Well, I'm looking forward to it. Rich, thank you so much for your insight when it comes to these 2 games, Division 8 and Division 7. You can't forget, people get excited, the headliners, Division 1, Division 2, but there's really good football being played in Division 7 and Division 8. I know you've seen a lot of it. So thank you for joining us, and I'll see you in the food line in the Gillette press box later this week.
All right. Thank you for having me on, Gage.
Sure thing, Rich. Thanks so much. Shout out again to Rich Garvin from the Worcester Telegram and Gazette for giving his insight on Divisions 8 and 7. And in a moment here, I want to really get this show off the rails by bringing in my former coworker, former colleague, Kyle Grabowski, who's now at the Metro West Daily News. Whenever Kyle and I get on screen, crazy things just end up happening. So let's just see how this goes. How we doing, Kyle?
Doing good, and I resent those allegations. I think we maintain the track. The track just happens to meander. We stay on track. The track just meanders all over the place.
We get to where we need to go. It just depends how long it takes to get there. So let's lay out that road for the uninitiated as to what exactly we're doing here. Division 6, it's number 1 Hudson versus number 3 Fairhaven. When it comes to Hudson, they're in your zone. I know you've seen them a decent amount this year. Last time they were in a situation like this, the situation being a title game, they played Auburn back in 2011, back when Auburn was just a brick house. 7-0 game. Auburn beat Hudson back in 2011. So this will be the first time any of these kids will be at Gillette Stadium. But when it comes to the Hawks, I mean, they got Jake Attaway slinging the thing, which might be one of my favorite just sort of last names I've seen. Attaway. It's like he throws a touchdown. Attaway. I don't know if that's a big one that they use on the sidelines for Hudson, but I know when it comes to him, he's over 100 career touchdowns this fall. They scored 40 plus regularly in the regular season. But when it comes to Hudson, you're the guy to sort of talk to about them. What has led Hudson to have the type of year that they're having this fall?
It is one of those things where it is very easy to say Attaway, and he certainly is one. Like we're talking like 10,000 career yards, a state total touchdowns record that he grabbed from Troy Flutie, and just watching him, you're like, that's a quarterback. Because when you watch high school football, like some kids play quarterback, he is a quarterback. And one of the first stories I ever read about him when he was a sophomore is like kids saying he's magic. And when you watch him in person, is really like, why can't they tackle him? Because he's not like a huge kid. Like, I'm 6'6" on a good day, and he's around my height, not like jacked, but nobody can tackle him. Like he is dancing around kids, likes to run them over from what I've seen. And also, like, you talk to him and he is just the most humble, gracious kid who puts everything on his line. He gives all the credit to his receivers, who are also great. Like it's easy to be like, okay, this is Jake Attaway, but it's the whole team that sort of the way Rich was talking about Uxbridge, where like these kids started playing together in second grade. You sort of build and grow. You lose in a couple quarterfinals and have that devastation. Last year, you finally get to a semifinals, and then you just get buried in the first half by this Fairhaven team that they're going to see that went on to win the state title, and then claw almost all the way back. And then you just carry that for a year, and you sit on it, and it marinates. And then now you're back here with another shot at those same guys on the other side of the field at Gillette for a state title.
And does this Hudson team, does it feel like one of those teams where, and I don't know if any of the coaches have said it to you or if any of the kids have said it, but when you talk to the seniors, it feels like the group that people have been waiting for like 5 years. Like, oh, when these kids get to like 12th grade, like this is going to be like, if they all stick together, like you said, a lot of these guys have been playing from a young age together, and that it really is a cast of characters. It's more than just Jake Attaway, but is it the vibe?
I think there was no if. It's not if they stay together. Like they weren't going anywhere else. Like they were on those second grade teams. They at one point, like they, they're so close that one of their players, Logan Lowe's, like severely injured himself after his first player of the year, and the captains have been alternating wearing his number 6 jersey throughout the year just to be like, hey man, like you're still with us, you're still together. And like that is just so much of it. And when you go to these games in Hudson, like it looks like the way people always tell you high school football used to be. Like the place is full because the town is just, they recognize like we may not see this again, and if we do, it's not going to be for a very long time. So we are going to come out and support these kids and watch this because we're not going to get this again. Like this is the shot.
Right. And I guess just taking a look at the last few weeks for Hudson, had that first round win against East Bridgewater pretty convincingly, 45-14. Had a close one with Sandwich in the quarters, 28-21. Close one with Norwell, 21-14. So I know Hudson was putting up big points, 30 plus, touching the 40s a little bit in the regular season, but it looks like they've had the battles the last few weeks as well, the close ones, the ones where it comes down to the little plays and little things as well.
Well, and I think that was so important, like winning the close game against Sandwich, and then to get another close one against Norwell. Like it's one thing to like just be better than teams and blow them out, but it's another one to play better and like understand this is how you win playoff games. This is how you take the step beyond where you've been to where you are. Like they forced turnovers on the first 2 possessions against Norwell, and like they only scored a touchdown on one of them, but like just being able to get the interception, being able to force a fumble, like you get in somebody's head and then you get ahead of them, then that matters because then you're in control of things and they know how to be there. And like I'm interested to see how they respond to Fairhaven, because I think Fairhaven's MO is like, we're gonna run and we're gonna run. Let's see if you can stop us. And then you just have to play a very different game. But I think like Hudson is just like Attaway has all these rushing numbers, but he also like the ball jumps out of his hand. He's got Nolan Yates as a one receiver. Both of his running backs can catch the ball. And I think it's just one of those interesting things where it's like, that's a real football team. And I don't think that you often see that in some of these smaller divisions, like just a complete team that has a good offensive line, transcendent quarterback, skill position players that are great in their own right. Like I think, and what has also allowed them to take that step is when Zach Attaway, Jake's dad, took over as coach last year too. Like he coached those kids when they were in second grade. So there's just a cohesion and an understanding between everyone of like, okay, we've been in these situations. This is how we want to handle this, or this is what I'm seeing. This is how I think we should attack this.
Right. And when it comes to just taking a peek at Fairhaven, as you mentioned, a team that loves to run the ball and really isn't going to try and trick you or lie about it. It's what they do. They do it particularly well. I know I mentioned when it comes to Hudson, this will be their first title game since 2011, but Fairhaven, they're coming in as the reigning state champs. They won in D6 last year, beat Salem 26-22. And if we're going to talk about Fairhaven running the ball, you have to start with Justin Marks, who this kid broke the all-time touchdown record for a career late in the regular season. Beat the mark set by Walpole's Ryan Izzo in 2009. He's got quite a resume when it comes to him in the ground game. He's like 5'11". I think he's like 5'11", 210. He's like kind of runs like a bowling ball, but when he gets rolling downfield, He seems like a really difficult kid to catch up with. And he's been in the end zone more than anybody else in Massachusetts high school football history. But it's going to be interesting to see. And I don't know how much of a factor it really plays. Maybe some coaches sort of underplay it, or it kind of goes away the second you get one big hit, and then it's like it sort of goes away. But I feel like there is something to be said for a team that was at Gillette last year and has had success at Gillette, because it's such a, I mean, it's not, it is a normal football game, but it's also not at the same time. There's so much, especially for a high school kid, there's so much surrounding it. If you're like 15, 16, 17, 18 years old, there's so much going on and there's so much of a sensory overload. But I do wonder though, it's like, how long does that take to maybe wear off, and how much of an advantage is that if you've been in there before?
I also wonder that, because I think it's easy to say, you know, it's 100 yards long, it's whatever, is it 50 yards wide, and you can say all of that, but like most of them are used to seeing it on TV. Like I talked to the kids that played at Fenway last year, and that's a different environment. That's a Thanksgiving game, but to be in there and be like, I like the phrase that the Franklin kids I talked to last year used, like to be on the other side of the fence and just have those different sight lines, because you know it's all so much of what football is like executing and doing what you're supposed to do and like being where you're supposed to be. But are you still doing that if you're saying like, oh wow, that's a lighthouse, oh wow, this is where, you know, Tom Brady did this, or you know, this is where Randy Moss did that. And you know, if you've done it before, fine, but like I think it's just something that nobody takes for granted. And it does matter how like you can get yourself from, okay, wow, we're at Gillette, to we are playing for a state championship.
Right.
And you know, I think that comes down to coaching, that comes down to the kids, and like it is high school kids. And I think if you've gotten to this point, like you're not just going there to be there, right? You're going there to raise a trophy and to bring that back to your town. And you know, it's one of those things that things can change on a dime, and whoever is willing to either roll with it or have a plan, because like either one of these teams can just knows how to blow teams out, but they've also both shown that they can play close. And I do wonder if it's not going to be Attaway and Marks that decided, if it's going to be like, okay, we're all focused on those two kids, who has the other guy that's going to have a big game and solve it.
Yeah. Or who forced the fumble, you know, at the end of the third quarter that kind of swung things the other way. Who sort of came in, you know, with the punch, where it looked like they were going to get a first down, but then you know, punch it loose, and then that. I mean, especially when you got two teams that can sort of like that play the way these two teams do. It's like every possession matters.
Well, and their defenses are so phenomenal. Like neither of them have allowed really more than, you know, 12 or 13 points a game. And, you know, that's hard. That's a frustrating thing to play against. Like who can play composed and make the right decisions? Who can say, okay, you know what? A punt is not the worst thing in the world. Let's punt it. Let's play really good defense and then just try and win a war of attrition here. Cause like, it doesn't matter how much you win there. Just remember that you won.
Right. Well, myself, I won't have game coverage of that game, but I will be lurking in the press box, and I will be definitely watching. I'm very interested to see how that one goes in D6. But once again, my good friend and former colleague, Kyle Grabowski from the Metro West Daily News, talking a little bit of Hudson and Fairhaven. I guess I'll see you later this week, Kyle. Thanks so much.
See you soon, man. Thank you.
All right. That was Kyle, everybody. Shout out to him. We're going to take a look at Division 5 here in a moment with Shawsheen Tech and Foxborough. And I want to bring in Graham Dietz from the Boston Globe, who's seen a little bit of Shawsheen Tech, seen a little bit of Foxborough. So, Graham, thanks so much for hopping on. I'm definitely curious when it comes to this game, how things are going to go to kind of, I guess, set the stage for people that might not know, just taking a look at these two teams in D5, Shawsheen Tech, the number 1 seed, Foxborough, number 3. Shawsheen Tech, last time they were in a state title game, 2022, they fell to North Reading in the D5 championship. It seems like they've just really been blowing everybody out in this postseason, blew out Gloucester, blew out Newburyport. had a really solid game against Old Rochester in the semifinals as well. I know you were able to see them a bit early on this year. What are your takeaways about, or as it relates to Shawsheen Tech? Why are they the number 1 seed? Why are they the top dogs right now in Division 5, do you think?
Yeah, thanks for having me, Gage. I appreciate you having me on.
Totally.
I'll say, I think obviously all the focus is going to be on this guy, Sid Tildesley. I don't know if you've ever heard of him before.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I've been seeing the numbers, I've been seeing the clips. So yeah, I'm very interested. What's it about Sid?
Yeah, all the focus is definitely in terms of what Jack Martinelli is, looking for this week in terms of stopping Shawsheen's offense is going to be focused on Sid and his playmaking ability. Sid's obviously a 4-year guy. He started since he was a freshman. He's a New England champion wrestler. And he's got all the tools pretty much, whether it's his passing game or also in the ground arena. He's really got all the tools. If I had kind of a pro comparison, I'd kind of put him sort of similar to a kind of mix between Taysom Hill and Josh Allen. A little shorter, but he's got those kinds of tools where any part of his kit is very dangerous for an opposing defense, no matter what, especially with an offensive line unit that they have right now, which I really feel like is working together. They really work as a unit. When I talked to Coach Costabile recently this week, just to kind of preview what was going to happen, he said there's really no guy that he can point out specifically on the offensive line that is shining more than the other. It's really just this unit that is protecting a guy under center, along with Jake Banda in the backfield, who are just going to completely trounce opposing defenses and really just take over the trenches. And I think that's kind of just the key for Shawsheen, is to look back at their schedule, see the fact that they have only allowed 5.9 points per game this entire season, and just trust your gut at that point, because I don't know what else you'd be doing. Dating back, I think coming into the season, dating back to Thanksgiving, they had only lost Thanksgiving in 2021. They had only lost 2 games, and they went 12-0 this year. So obviously they're not used to losing. They're not accustomed to that at all. I think obviously their conference can make a little bit of a difference in that. I think Foxborough's obviously, with the Hockomock, coming from a little bit tougher of a conference, and Costabile admitted to that as well. But I think that with such a shutdown defense and a guy like Sid, 40-6 as a starter, 5,232, yards passing his entire career, 69 touchdowns, on top of 2,000 plus rushing yards. You just got to trust your gut at that point. You're 12-0.
Right. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. I mean,
Yeah.
You're talking about that offense. I know I said it sort of at the top, but just looking at their postseason games again, round of 16 against Gloucester, 56-6, and then you look at Newburyport, 42-0, and you talk about the defense as well, what they've been averaging, giving up per game. It's in single digits, and then you look at Old Rochester, 28-7. So the offense has been clicking, the defense has been clicking. Well, I'm also interested, if we're going to look at the other sideline, if we're going to look at Foxborough, as you mentioned, Foxborough is no stranger to this game. They're the reigning D5 champs. They beat Hanover pretty good last year, 48-21. Them as a program, historically, going back to the 80s, they've been in plenty of title games in 83, 84, 87, 88, 91, 2000, 2005, 2006. But for the guys that are going back for Foxborough, they've been in this position before. And looking at their postseason run, talking about the Warriors now, round of 16, shutout win over Danvers, 27-0. Beat Dedham in the quarterfinals, 42-10. Beat Hanover in the semis, 14-7. Low scoring, gritty, got the job done. So when it comes to Foxborough, if you've seen them a little bit, or what your perspective is on Foxborough, I was able to see them earlier in the year against Walpole, where Walpole was able to kind of eke out a win late. I know it was a tough early regular season for Foxborough with the non-league schedule that they had, but it's obviously paid dividends for them. So now, as it stands, they're here, they survived, they got their scars, they got their bruises, but they're here, they're going to be at Gillette. What's your perspective on Foxborough coming into this one?
Yeah, for sure. I think one of the funniest things Al Costabiel said to me when kind of previewing what he was going up against Foxborough is he asked me, like, is Jack Martinelli paying the Kraft family to have this at Gillette? What's going on here? He's been coaching, 30 plus seasons, got to play Foxborough pretty much at a home stadium, if you will. And Jack Martinelli kind of denied those comments and said, it doesn't matter if we're playing at Boston College. It doesn't matter if we're playing at Uxbridge High School. Like, we're going to treat this just as the game ahead of us. But I thought that was funny. I'll get now just to kind of what makes them also just such a good contender this year. They dropped their first 3 games this season, which was really interesting, especially as defending champions. And Ben Angelina, their running back, senior running back, he was injured for those 3 games, and I think the 4th one as well. So obviously that played a really major factor in it because in just 9 games this season, he has 21 touchdowns, 46 career touchdowns, and rushed for 1,400 plus yards in each of the past 2 seasons. So I think this is a very ground and pound offense. Unlike Shawsheen, Jack Martinelli said that he is going to be kind of looking for the passing game first in the Shawsheen offense and the run game second. This is kind of the opposite, I would say, for Foxborough. You're looking for Ben, who has, he's a 6'2" frame, 220-pound bruiser in the backfield. You're going to be looking for him just to fly right through the gaps and just pretty much, do his best to get past the containment that Shawsheen has had all season. And that's not an easy job to do, obviously. I will say, though, that they have the good numbers. They have better numbers than Shawsheen do in terms of just staying healthy throughout the game and keeping players alive throughout the game. Ben only plays on the defensive side of the ball. On the offensive side of the ball. That's not the same for Shawsheen, where you got Sid playing also as kind of a rover type of player, a safety, and then his brother. So I see the numbers game, and I see the fact that, Ben and then Mike Marcello, the quarterback for Foxborough, who, has led them to 3 consecutive division final appearances, 2 straight Super Bowls, 3,000 yards and 30 TDs in his career. Those 2 guys, they're veterans of this type of game. They're veterans of going to Foxborough and playing this type of game. They know what to expect, especially in terms of just recency bias. It's their most recent experience being here, being at a place that's only 15 minutes away from home. They may take that for granted, but at the same time, that's a pretty cool advantage. And, I expect them to scare Shawsheen a little bit in terms of, Shawsheen hasn't let up that many points this year. They might give Shawsheen a scare. And if, say, they happen to be up at the half or something, that's where they really need to take advantage, because that's something that Shawsheen isn't used to.
Right. And I know you mentioned those first 3 games that they dropped early on in the regular season. Just looking at their non-league schedule, it's one of the more sort of impressive non-league schedules, even though they dropped all 3 non-league schedules to have. Just to kind of look at those first 3, had Scituate, who is obviously in the D4 championship now, on a Hail Mary week 1, Hail Mary pass. So ouch, that hurts week 1. So they lick their wounds. They go out there week 2. They play Walpole, who was in the Division III state championship last year. And Foxborough, they could have won on a Hail Mary. They had a Hail Mary themselves, pass into the end zone, fell incomplete against Walpole, dropped to 0-2. And so they say, okay, let's try and, close out our non-league here with a cupcake and play King Philip, who's a Division II powerhouse. And obviously King Philip won that game. But, as you mentioned, they may have dropped those first 3, but they have come back ferociously. So it's going to be really interesting to see what wins out here. You got the undefeated team who's rocking and rolling with Tilsley in the backfield, throwing it, running it, selling popcorn at halftime. And then you got Foxborough, the guys that have, the battle scars and the guys that have been there last year. So I'm looking forward to it. Thank you so much for your perspective on this one, Graham. You're going to be there? You're going to have game coverage for this one?
I am going to be there and have game coverage, yes.
Awesome. We'll keep your eye out for everything from Graham from that game for his live coverage and for his story. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you, Gage. I appreciate it. Have a good one.
All right. Shout out to Graham. We're going to keep this thing rolling. I'm having too much fun. We're already on D4. It's like there's a lot of good games here to talk about. And speaking of good games, and just looking at Division 4, we've got Duxbury and Scituate. As I mentioned, Duxbury, the number 1 seed. Who would have thought? Who's surprised, really? The Dragons being the number 1 seed. And then Scituate, number 2. And so to talk a little bit about Duxbury, I want to pull in the mayor of Duxbury, who also just happens to write stories every once in a while about Duxbury, Trevor Haas from the Boston Globe and the Duxbury Clipper, and anywhere else that allows people to write stories. How you doing, Trevor?
Doing well. Mayor of Duxbury, I guess I'll take it. Could be worse.
Yeah. No, I mean, just Duxbury, do they have a mayor? Do they do town council? I don't want to upset the actual mayor. Yeah. I don't know.
It's officially a mayor, yeah.
Okay, well, shout out to them. You can maybe be a consultant in some way. But talking about Duxbury, as you have to do if you're going to talk about Division 4, you have really no choice but to talk about Duxbury football and how great they have been this season and these last few years. Just looking at it now, the last decade or so, we're not even going to talk about 2011, 2010, 2008, because going back to 97, it's almost every other year Duxbury's found themselves in a game like this. But last year they beat Scituate 62-33. Year before they beat Grafton. They were in the game in 2021 as well. 1 point loss to Scituate. And then 2019, before COVID, fell to Springfield Central when Springfield Central was in D3 and when Duxbury was in D3. So I'm sure these kids at Duxbury don't take this for granted. They don't just roll the ball out and find their way back here. They find a way every year. It doesn't matter who goes, who comes back. They find their way to get back to this place. But obviously this year's team is not the same as last year's team or the years before. So when it comes to this year's Duxbury team, 2024, what is it about this year's Duxbury group in particular that has made them so special and has made them really the ones to beat in Division 4 this year?
Yeah, well, most people who cover a high school team for a local paper get to, block off some time in early December and get a little vacation in. But I know better. So every year I'm at Gillette, which could be worse. It's a fun gig, so I can't complain. Like you said, it's kind of the tradition every year. The past 5 years they've gone. The team 2 years ago was stacked with Matt Festa, who was at UNH. Yep. He was a heck of a quarterback, one of the best I've covered, and he was great. And they had a really high-octane passing attack. Last year, they turned to the run game with Alex Barlow, who's at Bentley now, one of the better players who I've covered as well. And he went nutty at Gillette. He had 5 touchdowns in that game and really carried them to a win. So this year, it's really a run-heavy offense as well with Jack Reese, who will play at Trinity next year. He's a really tough guy to cover and bring down. He's physical. He runs hard. He's also pretty fast, too, for his size. So look for him to, have a steady dose of carries. And Trevor Jones is a dual threat quarterback who can run and pass. Very efficient, makes good decisions in the pass game. So he's been impressive as well. Jack Sovic and Ian McNeil are really good wide receivers. James Scanlon is a great lineman. He's going to RPI next year. He's also great defensively. And Sovic's been sharp defensively as well. Cole Barbaria, Joe Barbaria. So it's really just a group of guys who, see that standard every year and they want to get back there themselves. There's definitely a lot of pressure, and I think they feel that in a good way. Like, it's like, all right, the standard here is to get to the Super Bowl and do what we can in that game. And they kind of buy into that every year. So this team is actually pretty young for the most part. They have 19 seniors, but the guys who play, there are a lot of sophomores and juniors out there. So it's certainly impressive what they've done given the roster turnover from last year.
Gotcha. Yeah, I mean, you mentioned Festa. I mean, I remember that name from years past, and it's cool to know that he's still doing his thing at the collegiate level. But I guess just taking a look at these last few weeks for Duxbury, looking at the round of 16, shut out Holliston 25-0, took care of Canton 30-27, got a little hairy, but they took care of it. Semifinal game against Tewksbury 28-21. So they've won the close ones. They've won the ones that they needed to win, and they've won the close ones here the last few weeks as well. Like I mentioned, that quarterfinal with Canton and that semifinal with Tewksbury. But from your perspective, Trevor, with what you know either about Scituate or really what you know about Duxbury and what they do particularly well. I know you said they're leaning more on the run game this year and maybe in comparison to other years. But what do you feel like the key or keys to this game are? Let's say, you're a coach and you're the coaches for the Dragons, and they got the whiteboard up in the coaches room, and they're throwing down the bulletin boards, or they're throwing down, I guess, the bullet points. What are you, from your perspective, what does Duxbury have to do particularly well to have success against Scituate again and win another state championship?
Yeah, I think the key for Duxbury in this game is tackling at a high level. I mean, that's kind of the key in every football game. So it's really about the fundamentals. But in this game in particular, I think that's very important. Like, Situate's going to have success in the air. They just have a really good quarterback in Johnny Donovan. Their wide receivers are really good. Their tight end's good. Glowak. They have a lot of good players. So I wouldn't expect it to be like a 14-13 type game like it was in 2021. I think it'll be pretty high scoring. But if Duxbury can kind of limit those long drives and, keep the Sailors from scoring a ton of points, I think they'll have a pretty good chance, because Duxbury is going to score as well. It's not like they're going to be shut out. I mean, they may not score a 62, but they're gonna score. So I think the key to this game is tackling at a high level and just, excelling in the secondary and not letting those 10-yard passes turn to 20 and 20 turn to 30, et cetera, et cetera. So I think that's the key for them. Number Scituate, I think it's just controlling the clock. I think if Duxbury has its way, it will have long drives, like, 17-play drives, 75 yards, and Reese will have a 3-yard touchdown run, and they use 7-8 minutes of clock. So that would be the ideal formula. But Scituate can get some 3-and-outs and some turnovers and wreak a little havoc, then it's going to be tough for Duxbury to pull away. So I think it's all about tackling for Duxbury and sustaining limiting long drives for Scituate.
Right. And then talking about the Sailors for a moment, just looking at their championship history, they've had quite a run of making it to the title game during the last decade. Obviously, last year, tough one against Duxbury, but 2021 they won that tough one, 14-13. Played Nipmuc back in 2018 when they were in D5 as well, and won that one. So both programs with championship pedigree. And looking at their road to how the Sailors got here, looking at the round of 16. 41-7 win against Melrose, took care of business there. Shutout win over Wayland, 28-0, and then they beat Grafton, who came into the game undefeated in that semifinal game, and beat Grafton 14-3. So they've got that one and a couple others where they've had to grind it out under their belt as well. And we mentioned it earlier, talking with Graham. Obviously, great arm on Johnny Donovan, able to get that long ball down into the end zone week 1 for that Hail Mary win against Foxborough. One of the more, I guess, exciting plays in games from the season, and it happened in week 1. I agree when it comes to, the versatility of their offense. Just taking a look at the last few weeks, or I guess the last few days, for Scituate, senior receiver Roman Glowak had a pretty good Thanksgiving. Had himself a couple touchdowns, 4 receptions for 35 yards and 3 touchdowns. That's pretty efficient. 4 catches for 3 touchdowns. Got him MVP honors. I know Bronson Bossy had a big game on defense in that semifinal game against Grafton as well. And just looking at the regular season as it relates to Scituate, outscored opponents 344-61. So 2 teams here that know each other very well, 2 teams with really good offenses, 2 teams with really good defenses. So I'm looking forward to it. I'm looking forward to just seeing 2 programs that are very familiar with each other and are playing at the top of their game, going at it again at Gillette Stadium. I imagine you will have game coverage, Trevor. Will you be there?
I'll be there. Okay.
There's nowhere else you'd rather be, of course. So thank you so much, Trevor, for popping in and talking a little bit about this game. Be sure to keep an eye on Trevor's feed or for his updates, live game updates from the game, and any stories that he might have. So, Trevor, I guess I'll be seeing you at Gillette. Thanks so much.
I'll see you there. Thank you.
All right. That was Trevor Haas, everybody, joining us to talk about Division 4 Scituate and Duxbury. That's going to be a really fun one. We're really looking forward to that. But I'm going to pop over and talk a little D3, which I'm really excited to do. That's number 3, Mansfield, number 4, North Attleboro. Just taking a look at Mansfield right now, just to kind of get the lay of the land as to how Mansfield got in this game. Had the round of 16 win against Doherty, 42-17. Quarterfinal win against Dartmouth, 14-6, a close one that they grinded out, were able to get done. And then a semifinal win against Walpole, who was on a bit of a Cinderella run during their postseason. Had big wins against Hingham and number 2 seed Bill Ricca before Mansfield shut that one down and earned themselves a trip to Gillette Stadium, their first trip to Gillette since 2019 for Mansfield. When they were in Division II, they shut out Lincoln Sudbury for a win in the D2 state championship in 2019. So this will be their first appearance since then. Before that, their previous championship win was against St. John's, Shrewsbury, when they won 28-14 in 2013. But yeah, when it comes to Mansfield, just taking a look at them, they got a head coach that's been doing it for a long time and doing it very well for a long time. Mike Redding just picked up his 300th career win against Foxborough on Thanksgiving. So he's going for 301. Those guys are going for 301. And Sean McCoy led the way on the ground in the semifinals against Walpole, 4 rushing touchdowns. So if you're putting up 4 rushing touchdowns against a team like Walpole that got hot late in the season, that's pretty indicative of things heading into Gillette this week and what that ground game might look like. So Mansfield, once again, back in the state championship, first time since 2019. They're going to try and get their first one in 5 years this week against North Attleboro. And speaking of North Attleboro, this will be their first state championship appearance since 2021 when they fell to Marblehead by a touchdown in D3. That was a great Marblehead team. I think that's the team that went undefeated, made it all the way to Gillette. I was at that Marblehead Westfield D3 state semifinal game back in 2021, and I remember that Marblehead team. That was a phenomenal team because Westfield was very good that year. But North Attleboro just came up short against the Magicians in that one back in 2021. But we fast forward to 2024. The team's path to the state championship has been relatively smooth. Just looking at it on the stat sheet, beat Woburn 35-7 in the round of 16. Took care of Westboro 42-7 in the quarterfinals, and then took care of previously undefeated Reading, who I'm fairly certain came into the tournament as the top seed. Took care of them 42-20. So North Attleboro has been getting the job done in Division III from the beginning of the season to the end, and that's why they're a top 5 seed in this bracket, being the number 4 seed, Mansfield being number 3. And just taking a look at them, their quarterback Chase Frisoli rushed for 1,000,000 yards. No, not 1,000,000, 311 yards on 27 carries, 4 touchdowns against Reading to power the program to the title game. So although he is the quarterback, he loves to run the ball as well, it appears. So that is going to be a fun one at Gillette. Mansfield versus North Attleboro, 2 programs that have been to Gillette in recent years. And are going for their first titles in a few years. So D3, that'll be a fun one between 2 top 4 seeds. But shifting gears to Division II as we get towards the final 2 games here, Divisions 2 and Division 1. But I want to start with Division 2. I'm going to pull in Nate Weitzer from the Boston Globe here in a moment to chit-chat about this one. Nate, as I pull you in here in a moment, really curious about your perspective on this game, the CM Catholic Memorial versus King Philip in Division II. I know last year King Philip, or I should say Catholic Memorial, sort of stumbled late in the postseason and fell. I think it was in the semis, and King Philip was able to get over the top in the state championship game in Division II. Finally, as I'm sure they felt after a couple of years of running into CM. But when it comes to, if we want to start, I guess, with Catholic Memorial, what is your perspective on Catholic Memorial this year? It's not just all Mackay Dodd, although, I mean, a lot of it, Mackay Dodd, he's running the ball like nobody else really is in the state. I mean, they got that great defense with Tucker back there as well, verbal commit to Boston College, along with his other half dozen teammates that are also verbal commits to Boston College. But when it comes to Catholic Memorial, what is your perspective on Catholic Memorial this season?
Yeah, well, the first thing you need to do is plan for that stretch play to Mackay Dodd. Yeah, I mean, I'm sure King Philip and all their good defensive minds are thinking about how they're going to try to stop that because it just looks like the defense is stuck in mud when they try. He's a state champion sprinter. He's got great blocking out there on the edge, and he just turns the corner and he's gone. So, I mean, if they can kind of muck that up, KP, and turn it into more of a game that depends on seniors. Maybe they have a shot here. I'm sure they have a shot, But yeah, just focusing on CM, it's interesting, like more balance, more depth than in past years, less of like the clear go-to guys at receiver. I mean, there's clearly a go-to guy at back here, but I mean, when they spread out, yeah, it's there's like 6 to 8 guys who could be the go-to guy on a given play. Then they have the ability to platoon with their defensive backs. I mean, I was so impressed how sticky their backs were against St. John's Prep, not giving anyone separation. But KP, they're not going to be passing it that often, so perhaps they have an advantage there. At the same time, yeah, CM's linebackers you mentioned, and Timpson back. Him being out last season was just as key as them losing Dodd and why they actually bowed out of the playoffs there. And with JD Renar leading that defensive line, I mean, there's no weak points here. And then of course you have the GOAT, as some would say, the coaching, and he'll go right to that double wing when he thinks it's required. So it's really a fascinating matchup between these two programs.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. I'm going to be there on Thursday for that one as well. But I also want to do the vaunted triple box here. I also want to pull in Alex Agrella here for a moment to talk a little bit about Catholic Memorial as well before we move on to King Philip. We're just coming in hot. We didn't even tech test this. Alex, can you hear us?
Yeah, oh yeah, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Perfect. Okay, we're jumping right in. So, I mean, yeah, Nate makes a lot of great points as it relates to this year. But I'm interested in your perspective. I know, I've seen him a few times. We've probably been on the sideline a few times that we've seen him together. But when it comes to CM this year, what's your perspective on Catholic Memorial and this year's team?
I mean, for me, I took a lot of crap, and they gave me a lot of crap because I had them at 6 after their, and I, part of me wanted to just be that guy that gave CM a little bit of, hey, there's some adversity there. I mean, they got knocked out by a great Marshfield team, and I had some questions. They had lost Bork to a transfer. They had lost some very great linemen. They lost 2, at Division I linemen, right? So I had some questions, but I think that what I'm really impressed with was JD Rayner, who made a transition from tight end to tackle. He put on like 30 pounds of like good weight, not bad weight, good weight. You see him, he still looks as athletic as ever. He still moves like never before. And he's going to James Madison for a reason, right? So I think that was what really impressed me, was that their line lost so much, but actually, I didn't understand how much talent they really had on it. They have guys like Mahoney that have been playing a lot of snaps for them over the years. And then, it's also one of those things where those guys have been waiting for those moments. So, they're ready, on the line. So I think that's what I was very impressed with, was how their line has been moving this year. I've also, like Nate said, they have how many receivers that they can get the ball to? Isaiah Simmons, who he can come out of nowhere and just be that dude. I'm a huge fan of, I always butcher the name, but I just call him Fabulous or Weak Fab. I think he's a guy who he can do so many different things. I like to say he's kind of a blend of, when Teo Asanubi was at Catholic Memorial, and then Jaden Skeet as well. He's a good, healthy blend. I think he's a great player. And then Gavin Brown is also that dude. He just picked up an offer from it was Northern Illinois, or one of those schools out there. But I mean, he's a tremendous player that they got late in the summer. So that really impressed me with how they're able to move the ball. But also, like always, they have younger kids. And I'm gonna hate myself because I looked up his name, but who had the pick 6, y'all, against Prep? That, like, there was the freshman that balled out.
Oh, he's a freshman. I was thinking the sophomore Tucker, who is not Tucker.
No. He did too. No, but somebody picked 6 Vargas on the first drive of the second half. I'm blanking on his name, but he's a freshman. So, again, they're just so young there. Like, Kais Flannery will be back. He's a junior. So that really impressed me. Nate, you know the name?
Oh, yeah. I looked it up here. Liam Conlon, the freshman linebacker. And great point on the offensive line because they've got Marcelino Antalunis, that huge tackle on the other side, and I remember seeing them in the first scrimmage, and Thomas Claiborne, the former NFL player, is now coaching the line because Milo stepped down, Dib's right-hand man for 40 years, and he's just like working one-on-one with this dude who is obviously a big-time prospect, I think going to BC as well. So to see them kind of like take off as the season progresses, it's not really a surprise when you have that kind of coaching there.
And if I can just say, when you talk, I cannot believe I forgot Mark, but oh my God, when I saw him against their week 1 opponent, oh my God, when I saw him like for the first time, because he had gotten to BC, he committed to BC, and, I hadn't watched, I don't think he played a lot in the 23 season, because again, you have a lot of dudes on that offensive line that year. But when I saw him, I went, oh my God, I understand 100% why they offered him. 100%. He is a tower, an absolute tower.
Yeah. And that's the thing. I remember the first time I saw him. I mean, I think I went to a CM preseason practice, and I was concerned. Like, I didn't have a roster. I was like, wait, am I going to know who he is? Like what number is he? Like, what is it? I'm like, oh no, this is him. This is him right here. Like, it's just like very, very, very obvious when it comes to him. So I'm really interested to see how it's going to look for Catholic Memorial against, a program like King Philip. It's not a program that they're not unfamiliar with. It's not like they're sort of an alien program. They're very, very familiar with King Philip. And so, Nate, I want to throw it to you as it relates to King Philip. I mean, with these two teams, and correct me if I'm wrong, Nate, I think you had the story for the Globe earlier this season where I think, and I I butchered it when we had our live show a month ago, but, are the two, are the two best teams in the States? Was it Catholic Memorial and King Philip? Are those the two that you posed, or did I slip it up again?
I did. Yeah, no, the only qualifier was, I think I said Eastern Mass, because that's what we cover in the Globe. We don't rank Springfield Central. And at the time, Springfield definitely had a claim to that top spot potentially. But yeah, they're still number 1 and number 2 in our poll, CM, KP, and it's hard to really argue with that. I mean, KP 25 straight, CM, if not for those injuries, who knows what their in-state win streak would be at this point. So it is really a fascinating matchup, and it'll be, I know everybody's kind of looking ahead of like, what are we going to do with this poll at the end of the year, based on how these top 2 Super Bowls go. Right.
And here's the thing. When it comes to King Philip, I have yet to see them in person over these years. I've done my best as it relates to the YouTube footage, the huddle clips. We got great people all across the state that are on the sideline tweeting out live video at games. But it's almost like the way I hear about King Philip football. You just look at the resume. It's very obvious what Coach Brian Lee and all of those guys have been able to do over these last few years. But for me, not seeing them in person, it almost feels like urban legend stuff as to like what King Philip has been able to do in Division II as a public school. So I guess when it comes to them, Nate, I guess I'll cede the floor to you first, and then I want to get your perspective too, Alex. What is it about King Philip? Maybe educate me a little bit as somebody who hasn't seen him in person but will for the first time this week. When it comes to King Philip, why are they so consistent? What makes them so difficult to try and get over the top of?
I'm sure to know that you really have to be in their building day to day, and even like their weight room. Every coach talks about culture setting, but it is really a way of life down there. They are able to draw in a couple towns, I guess, as a regional school that helps. But it's the system, the coaching that I've seen in their opener against Walpole, just a masterclass from defensive coordinator Matt Wassel. They just come at you with this sophisticated, scheme that you don't really see at the high school level too often. And I'm sure it's for a lot of high school quarterbacks, it is overwhelming. And then on the other side, it just seems like the power they have, they just churn out these linemen, even with only one guy coming back on the line, I think this year. And then they put in new backs. They've got a stable of backs, and yeah, they're really tough to stop on either side or deal with. And then mix in the occasional pass, right? I think SARS is John Saranides still down there as a consultant, and he's an expert at that. When they won their Super Bowls a couple of years ago, it's just like knowing the right time to mix in that pass after you soften the defense up.
Right. What do you thought, Alex, when your own perspective as it relates to KP, whether it be offense, defense, what's, I guess, your perspective on why KP has been so successful this year in particular, do you think?
So I think that, Nate hit it right on the head. It starts in that building. And we said this in our live stream the other day. I can tell you this, those kids love Coach Lee, one, and they love KP football too. I bring it back to when Coach Lee was my coach of the year last year, and I went and gave him an award. And there were 40 kids that went and wanted to go watch him get the award. And they were all just so happy for him and talking about the accomplishments of him. And he's obviously giving it back to the kids, but they love KP football, one. And two, I can tell they practice very, very fluently. He is on them if they make any mistakes. It would not surprise me if he makes them run laps just for fumbling a ball at practice. Because you could tell they don't make many mistakes. They want to impose their will. You can also tell that, especially defensively, they tackle a lot of practice. You could tell they're very fundamental in what they do. And this is why I also love KPCM, because you could tell Dib is no different in terms of the way he runs his practices. They're, limit the mistakes, and they don't want to spend time having to wait for a quarterback to get hot to complete some passes. No, run the ball. And they keep it very simple. And I think that this is why you see teams like them that run the offenses they do have a lot of success, to where when Drew LaPlante goes down, they put in a fourth running back. I think he was a freshman, and he ripped off 100 yards. And it's because it is very, you can tell those kids they know what they do. They're not going to, then the coaching staff is not going to put those kids in a position to where they're outside of their level of comfortability athleticism wise. And that's why I have a lot of when I go to and not only that, I have to actually, Nate's probably been to it. Have you been to a KP game, Nate, at KP?
No, I saw them at Walpole at the house that Lee built this year. Yeah.
Well, I'll tell you, y'all got to go to a KP game because it's a vibe. They always go. It's always packed out. They love the football team, and it's a community out there. You guys talk about John. John wasn't even on the team for a while, and you saw how much pride he had in KP while he was there. So I think that that's what makes them special over there is, they're really good at what they do, and they take a lot of pride in what they do.
Right. Well, as they should, because it's been successful for them for quite a few years now. So that's going to be Division II. I'm really looking forward to that. Once again, if you're just joining us, we got Alex Agrello from Recruiting Board, Nate Weitzer from the Boston Globe, and of course, I'm Gage from MassLive. But gentlemen, it's here. We've reached this point of the show. Division I. We're here now. It's Needham. It's Xaverian. It's undefeated Needham against a Xaverian team who, I guess, like Foxborough, they have their scars. They lost 3 of 4 in the middle of the regular season. But they got their guys healthy, or at least, as much as they can in early December, healthy. And they are ready to go. Needham, being the public school, undefeated. Great guys like Aiden Williams, Charlie Simeone. You got Will McDonald on that defensive line, Ben Schreiber at linebacker. It's a cast of guys, over 20 seniors that have all been waiting for this year. It's kind of been building to this year. You got Xaverian, you got Vincent Busa, you got Will Wood, who's kind of grown into being the type of quarterback that the Hawks need at this point in the year as a sophomore. The list goes on and on. Micah Amidi, Dominic Funk. We take all of that, and with all of that said, now it's all about one game. It's a team like Xaverian, who was the reigning Division I state champions. Of course, last year's team a little bit different in comparison to this year's team. There's no John Montero, who is actually, he was injured for the title game, but obviously had a big helping hand in getting them there. He's now at Liberty. Obviously, Henry Hasselbeck, now at UCLA. But they bring a lot back on that defensive side as it relates to those important guys up front. I mentioned Dominic Funk, adding him as a guy that transferred during the season or during the summer, last summer. from St. Sebastian's. He's from Needham. I wonder how much fun that'll be, being a Needham guy playing for Xaverian against Needham. That'll be a fun one to watch. But all that's to say that there's so many different angles to this, so many different ways to look at it. But I'll give the floor to you, Nate. When it comes to Needham, Xaverian, and the D1 title game on Thursday, what are you most intrigued about? What's the question mark above your head or the thing that you're thinking about most as it relates to this game?
I think, what's Griffin Carr got, the Needham quarterback, because I think Xaverian's going to be like, all right, we're packing this phone booth and we're not letting Aiden Williams beat us. And they have the bulk to do it. I mean, Prep did as well. They did a very good job. It's interesting. Kept saying it's one game because I feel like if they played Prep 10 times, I don't know if they win 3 of those, like they just made their own breaks. They got some breaks from the weather. But this team it's a special group of seniors. I couldn't pick against them. I couldn't see that these seniors going out that way. Xaverian is going to be a very tough matchup for them. I think the key to watch is, will Vince Busa be good to go? Because we saw in the semifinals, he played a quarter, could not go the rest of the way. I think this will be for people who love defensive football and want to see great edge rushers, great linebacker play. Like, this is the game to watch because both offenses might have trouble against those defenses.
Yeah. I kind of feel the same way, and that's kind of the thing that I'm thinking about most is, Carr hasn't had to win games for Needham just based off the way that they do things. You have Williams back there. They use him in the Wildcat as well, where he does take those direct snaps. And Bickford has been involved when it comes to being on the receiving end of passes from Carr, as well as Schreiber. I think he gets some tight end work as well in the red zone. He's been able to get free and get on the same page as Carr. But I am interested in that as well because, Wood, as it relates to Will Wood, the Xaverian quarterback, the sophomore, I saw him early on in the regular season against Springfield Central. I think that was game 2 or game 3. It's on the road. It's in Springfield, long drive. And that game came down to the final drive where there's 2 minutes left. And it was up to sort of Will Woods move that ball downfield. And the game, he was throwing the ball downfield, but it ends with an interception from the freshman Anthony Whaley at Springfield Central. Then I fast forward and I see, of course, Xaverian against BC High in the semifinal. And it wasn't a complete 180, but you could see that growth just with those games under the belt where, you're coming into the game, BC High, they are the higher seed. They were the number 2 seed coming into the state tournament. And you could see that poise. And Coach Al Fernaro at Xaverian, he was telling me earlier this week that he was using some sort of comparison or analogy as you guys would talk to him. He so lovingly loves to use analogies, talking about, like a 2-foot putt or like a 2-foot putt on a green, where maybe early on in the season, it was maybe a bit harder for Will to make the 2-foot putts. Now he's making them consistently. He's making those putts. And it's not about what's going on the outside noise. It's all about just kind of getting the ball in the hole. And he's been able to make those shots, so to speak, more so late as the season has gone on. But Alex, curious about your perspective as it relates to this game. I know you've seen a lot of Needham. You've seen a lot of Xaverian. What's the question mark for you? What's the thing when you see Needham Xaverian on the piece of paper that gets you the most, I guess, intrigued going into this game?
Gage, first off, everything you just said about Will Wood is 100% right. Right. And that I think is my biggest question is, Will Wood, what do you got? Because I honestly think that when Xaverian, people, we were, or Nate, were you at the CM Xaverian game? I know you were, Gage.
No, I was not. No.
Well, they had gotten themselves in a hole sometimes, and I thought that, they kind of just let Will kind of go crazy. They just let him run around. They said, go do what you got to do to get us in the game, buddy. And they were moving the ball. They dug themselves out of 2 14-point holes. So I think that, I don't know what my screen is.
I don't know what's going on over there. You got
it's Apple or something like that. You go like this and
wait, do I get one too? Wait a minute. I guess it's just you.
If you're using I don't know if you're using the FaceTime thing.
I don't know. I love it. You can keep it going. See what else you can do. But,
Right. So Will Wood, I just think if you're, people will say that, needing what got them to the championship in the first place, was conditions weren't the best, prep couldn't really throw the ball. Well, what would be the case if they could, right? I think they're still in the game, right? But if conditions are good and I think if Xaverian is able to move the ball through the air, this is going to be a very interesting game. With that said, I am on the fence that Nate was saying earlier too. It's hard to pick against these Needham Rockets, man. Like, I love this team, and it's one of those teams that you knew last year if you covered them that they would probably be in this position. I wish I had doubled down on it even more. I had them as 5 in my top 10, but I think something that really stands out to me is, I'm a guy who, I always talk about offense and it's easy to do so, but I think the story is the defenses with both these teams. And how many times do we really get to say that in Massachusetts where it's like, oh no, the top prospects, the top players are on defense. Like, they're strictly defensive players. Like, Will McDonald is a defensive lineman. Ben Schreiber's a linebacker. Aiden Williams, linebacker. Tom Funk, defensive lineman. Vince Bucher, he'll play linebacker the next level. He's a hell of a running back, but, he'll probably be a linebacker the next level. And Micah Andy. So Dave Shipiato, heck of a safety. So I think that's kind of the story of me. And I really think that this is going to be the ultimate boxing match. The ultimate boxing match. And I think that Xaverian's got a little bit more of a haymaker in them if they can throw the ball and, move the ball a little bit through the air. But, nobody can throw a body shot like Needham. And you land enough of those on anybody, you're going to take them out. So I think it's the ultimate boxing match. It's the ultimate showdown. I'm very excited because I love the public versus private aspect. We won't get into all that, I don't think, here today, but I love that aspect, and I love that it's kind of people are a little bit divided. I love that as well. But it's going to be a heck of a game.
Right. And I'm interested. The thing that interests me, and I was kind of talking about it with Kyle earlier when we were talking about the Hudson game in D6, Hudson in D6, where this is a game that Xaverian as a program is very familiar with, where, I mean, you lost key guys last year, but you have guys like Micah on that defensive line, Busa, Chiavagato was playing last year to a certain degree. So they understand the whole thing of what sort of Gillette is. I mean, I remember back in, my sophomore year, I wasn't playing, I was keeping the bench warm. But when we went to Gillette Stadium, it's like, as a high school kid, it feels like a completely different game. Like, there's just so much going on around the game. You get all the parents and everything, clapping as you get on the bus to go. It's a whole situation. You're playing on that turf field. You come through the tunnel and you're like, oh my God, I'm here. This is a whole thing. And in Needham, I mean, these last few years, and we didn't even get into the familiarity of last season where it was a 3-point game against Xaverian in the state semifinals, and Xaverian obviously gets on top, goes on to win the title. But this Needham team every year has taken the step forward. And now if you're looking at a map, this is sort of uncharted territory. If they're looking at the map for them, this is a position that they, for the first time really this year, haven't found themselves in before. A lot of these kids playing in this game. And there is that external chatter, which I'm sure Coach Kopsko is, doing the best he can to sort of lock down, where, it has to be said, that element that you brought up, Alex, where, it's a public school versus the private school. I'm sure there's a lot of people that are maybe, just sort of, in the back sort of being like, okay, Needham, go get him, whatever. As I'm sure, people, on the private school side of things are feeling the same for Xaverian. But I'm interested to know, when it comes to Needham, I mean, maybe it's the first drive, maybe it's the first really big hit in the hole where you kind of go like, okay, we're playing football now. Like, we're really locked in on what's in front of us. We don't need to deal with like, oh, am I in the Jumbotron? Okay, well, there's my mom. Okay, great. No, like we're here right now. So I'm curious, Nate, how much stock do you put in that, where it's Xaverian, it's a program that is very familiar with this environment and familiar with what this all means in comparison to Needham, who this is uncharted territory? How much stock do you put in that, if at all?
Could be a factor, but I mean, sometimes you relish it, right? I mean, you relish people picking against you, saying you have no chance, whatever. I don't know if anyone's really disparaging Needham to that degree, but I think based on what I've seen, like this is a very confident group. And even talking to the Xaverian side, they say, like they might have more size than us. So I don't think they're going to be intimidated going in there. I think they probably feel confident knowing they have maybe the best player in the state at linebacker there in Aiden Williams, and that their defense has just been lights out. Like to what Alex was saying, they've given up 77 points to starting D and scored 26. So what's the first big play going to be? Maybe it's that defense turning something for them where they get the initial momentum and they feel like, okay, we're in this and we feel like we belong. At least, talking to some of them, they certainly feel like that. Like they can play with the big boys. Most of these guys, they played against Xaverian at Marciano Stadium last year. Yeah, but with a lot on the line. Interesting that it was a 3-point game where Xaverian had 2 long field goals from our guy Luke Bell, who the day before the season decides he's going to also play linebacker for Xaverian. And on that same day, almost, Needham, Alex Rufo, the soccer star, says, you know what? I'm not going to play soccer. I'm going to kick for you guys. So it would be really interesting storyline if this comes down to a field goal one way or another.
Just a Rufo versus Bell battle, just for it all. That I mean, I don't know if I've ever covered a game like that where it's just a kicker battle where you're getting field goals. I mean, with me personally, I was out in Western Mass covering Western Mass football for the last 5 years, and not many people are kicking field goals out there. A lot of people going for 2, a lot of people going for it on 4th and 8 in the red zone. So yeah, I mean, that's a good point, Nate, where it's like both teams are playing such great defense. It becomes a battle of who wants to make the most 30-yard field goals. That's definitely that could definitely be a thing. We could have a sort of a funky final score, but whoever's got the bigger number wins. But Alex, any other thoughts on this game as to what you're looking forward to, if anything else? I mean, with this matchup, you can really flip this thing upside down, left, right, and there's so many parts of it. But anything else that really jumps out to you about this one?
The fans. Because let me tell you, like Xaverian fans, those boys love their football team. They'll show out, right? And they're gonna be loud, they're gonna be proud, and they've been there before, right? And I'm gonna tell you, it don't matter, rain, sleet, snow, those guys will be out there, right? And they're gonna be shouting them out. However, they meet a Needham Rockets fan base who is co-ed, so they just have a ton of people, right? But those fans love their Needham Rockets, right? And that's one thing I want to play into is like that's going to be very interesting to see how that impacts the game, because if there's just really a ton of excitement from Needham and everyone's loud, how does that help or how does it hurt them? Like, or is the stage too big? Or, if they get too excited and then the crowd is too quiet, or, how does that impact? Because I promise that those fans do play a huge role in Needham's success as well. I mean, you guys were at that game. That had so much to that community when they won. They're all on the field. Like, the cops are having to literally stop the student from rushing the field. Like, it's such a vibe when you're out on the hill. And they're bringing the hill to Gillette Stadium this time, So I'm very excited about how that's going to play. I think that's my, if you want to even call it an X factor in the game. You got 2 big fan bases coming at it. And yeah, I think that I'm very excited to see, how it plays into, because as you said earlier, and I was listening actually when you had said it, I think it is. I don't want to say it's overblown in terms of like, we've been here before, because, we've also seen how many times the Patriots have been there before and, they blew a perfect season. So sorry if anyone's sour about that still. I know I am, but I do think that there is value in that. Zavarian was waiting for this moment, and some people didn't think they would get there. Need him, first moment in 13, 14 years. It's a lot of pressure, no doubt.
Right. And speaking of the fans, I was talking with Coach Fernaro from Zavarian earlier this week, and he was saying their sideline, the Zavarian sideline, is on the side with all the fans right behind them. So
God.
he said he might not be in love with that because it's hard because you get both crews right there, and that's a lot. That's a lot of volume. So I mean, this game could be won at the margins. So, but so both fan bases are going to be rocking and rolling right there on that sideline. But yeah, gentlemen, this is going to be it's Division I. This is the way it goes. We just always at this point in the year, it's always a great game. Obviously, last year's games of Zavarian St. John's Prep came down to the final drive. Looking forward to exactly how this one goes. It's going to be a fun one at Gillette. Alex, I know you'll be there running up and down the sideline. Nate, I know you'll be there as well. I'll be there all 3 days, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. I'm looking forward to this one. Once again, this has been Gage from MassLive. Alex Agrella from Recruiting Board. Check out Alex and Recruiting Board on YouTube if you haven't already. We got Nate Weitzer from the Boston Globe. Thank you so much, gentlemen. I'll see you in the food line at Gillette later this week.
Yeah, if I get the red pass, hopefully.
Yeah, right. There you go. Send some emails. Thanks so much, guys.
Yeah, sounds good. Thanks, Gage.
See you guys. Awesome. All right, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us for the show. This is a great one. A lot of great guests. Thank you to everybody that jumped in and contributed to the show today. Once again, shout out to Nate and Alex. Nate from the Boston Globe and Alex from Recruiting Board. Check them out on YouTube. I'm Gage Nutter. I will be at Gillette all 3 days, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. They're gonna have to carry me out of there. I'll be ready to go. I'll have game coverage from the Division I game that we just talked about, Needham and Zavarian. It's going to be a fun one. Get your tickets if you haven't already. Make sure you show up with your QR code. Keep that line moving, and it's going to be fun. It's the end of the high school football season, and there will be 8 champions by the end of this week in Divisions 1 through 8. So once again, thank you so much for joining us, and keep an eye out for our coverage from Gillette later this week.